Does anyone ever really know what goes on behind closed doors? We live in houses that look much the same. 2 cars in the driveway, a basketball hoop over the garage, maybe a well-tended flower bed out front. We wave to the neighbours, chat about the weather, complain about school taxes. On the surface, everything is normal. But inside can be a different world entirely. Mine was. For nearly 20 years, my world inside our seemingly normal suburban house near Columbus, Ohio, was a landscape of carefully navigated silence and emotional landmines. My name is Ethan Miller. I'm 39 years old, a high school history teacher. I love the smell of old books, the dusty quiet of libraries, the way history repeats itself if you aren't paying attention. I have 2 kids, Leo, who's 11, and Chloe, who's 8. They are, without exaggeration, the best parts of me. The rest was Sarah. Sarah was my wife. We met in college, young and full of what I thought was promise. She was beautiful, driven, meticulous. I was me. Quiet, a bit clumsy, more interested in the past than the future she was always meticulously planning. We fit, somehow. Or maybe we just molded ourselves into fitting the picture we thought we were supposed to be. The crack started early. Subtle things I chose to ignore. The way she'd flinch if I touched her unexpectedly. The way sex dwindled after the first year, becoming a rare, almost transactional event tied only to trying for kids. "I'm tired, Ethan," she'd say, or "I have a headache." Or, eventually, just a flat, unyielding silence. After Chloe was born, it stopped almost entirely. Physical affection of any kind became a minefield. A hand on her shoulder met with a stiffening, a hug with a quick, awkward pat on my back. "Don't be so clingy," she'd snap, her voice sharp enough to make me recoil as effectively as if she'd slapped me. I told myself it was normal, people change. Marriages evolve. Maybe this was just our evolved state. We had the kids, the house, my stable teaching job, her climbing the corporate ladder. We presented a united front at school events, at neighborhood block parties. We were the Millers. Normal. But inside I was walking on eggshells. Every conversation felt like a test. Say the wrong thing, offer the wrong opinion, leave a coffee mug on the counter for too long and the air would freeze. Not always a shout, sometimes just a look, a sigh, a dismissive wave of her hand that cut deeper than any yelling. She had a way of making me feel like I was perpetually disappointing her, failing her, that everything wrong in her life, in our life, was somehow my fault. My quiet nature was boring. My love for history was stuck in the past. My slightly stocky build from years of comfort eating when I felt low was letting myself go. I started to believe her. I was boring. I was letting myself go. I was the problem. I used to love woodworking. My dad taught me in his garage when I was a kid. The smell of sawdust, the feel of wood grain, the quiet focus of shaping something with my hands. It was my escape, my therapy. But over the years, between work, the kids, and the sheer exhaustion of navigating Sarah's moods, the tools in the garage gathered dust. My small workbench became a dumping ground for forgotten sports equipment and holiday decorations. Another thing I'd let slide, another failure. The incident, the one that finally shattered the illusion of normalcy, didn't start with a dramatic fight. It started with a work conference Sarah attended in Chicago. She was gone for 3 days. I handled the kids, the school runs, the homework, the meals, the usual solo parent routine I'd become accustomed to even when she was home. I missed her, or maybe I missed the idea of her, the wife I thought I married. On the second night, while scrolling through my old college friends' mundane updates on Facebook, a message popped up. It was from a name I didn't recognize, an account with only a few photos. The message was short, cryptic. It contained a screenshot of a message exchange. Sarah's name was clearly visible at the top of one side of the conversation. The other name was saved as Alex Marketing. The messages were suggestive, flirtatious, definitely not work-related. One read, "Can't stop thinking about last night. You were amazing." Another, "Wish I was back in your room instead of this boring session." My stomach dropped, not because of the potential infidelity, not immediately. It was the cold, hard evidence of a life she was living that had nothing to do with me, with us. A life where she was engaging in the very physical intimacy she withheld from me. The hypocrisy stung more than the thought of another man. I didn't respond to the anonymous sender. I just stared at the screenshots, the glowing screen a stark contrast to the dark, quiet living room. Leo and Chloe were asleep upstairs, their breathing soft and even. Their innocent presence in the house made the messages feel like a violation, a betrayal of something far bigger than just our marriage vows. It was a betrayal of the fragile peace I'd tried so hard to maintain for them. When Sarah got home the next evening, she was tired but seemed pleased with the conference. She chatted about networking, about presentations. I waited until the kids were in bed. My heart was pounding, a nervous, unfamiliar rhythm. I pulled out my phone, the screenshots burning in my hand. "Sarah," I started, my voice trembling slightly. I got this message yesterday." I showed her the phone. Her eyes scanned the screen. For a split second I saw something flicker in them. Surprise? Guilt? But it was gone instantly, replaced by something cold and hard. Her face hardened, her jaw clenched. "Where did you get this?" she demanded, her voice sharp, accusatory. Not, "What is this?" or "Oh my God," but, "Where did you get this?" It was sent to me. An anonymous account, I stammered, caught off guard by her reaction. Her laugh was harsh, humorless. "Anonymous? So you're just believing random strangers on the internet now, Ethan? My own husband." She stood up, pacing the living room. "You're spying on me, going through my things?" "I didn't go through your things. Someone sent it to me. And you believed them, without even asking me." She threw her hands up. "This is unbelievable. You're so insecure, Ethan, so paranoid. I go away for a few days, try to do something for my career, and you're here, stewing in your own suspicion, believing garbage sent by God knows who. Sarah, the messages are from your account. Your name is right there. Oh, please, anyone can fake screenshots these days. This is ridiculous. You're making a huge deal out of nothing." She walked towards me, her eyes narrowed. "Why are you doing this?" "Trying to sabotage my trip. Are you jealous? Is that it? You can't stand that I have a life outside of this house, outside of you?" The conversation devolved from there. Every attempt I made to bring it back to the messages, to her behavior, was met with a counterattack. She twisted everything. My concern was control. My hurt was insecurity. My questions were accusations. She didn't admit to anything, didn't explain, didn't apologize. She just kept turning the spotlight back on me, highlighting my perceived flaws, my failures as a husband, the reasons why she must be so unhappy. "Maybe if you were more attentive," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "Maybe if you put some effort in. Maybe if you weren't so comfortable." Comfortable. That word landed like a punch. Comfortable in my quiet life, my worn clothes, my slightly soft body. It was clear what she meant. I wasn't enough. I hadn't been enough for years. And now she was using this incident as proof, as justification. We went to bed in silence, the air thick with unspoken accusations and my own churning self-doubt. Had I overreacted? Was I really that insecure? Maybe it was fake. Maybe I was just looking for a reason to be unhappy because the marriage was already so empty. This was her pattern, I realized later. Whenever she was cornered, whenever she felt guilty, she attacked. She projected. She made it my fault. And for too long, it worked. The weeks that followed were a blur of escalating tension. Sarah didn't mention the screenshots again, but her behavior was different. More volatile. She'd swing from icy silence to sudden bursts of anger over trivial things. The gaslighting intensified. I'd remember a conversation we had, a promise she made, and she'd flatly deny it. "I never said that, Ethan. You must be mistaken." Or, "You're remembering it wrong." My own memory started to feel unreliable. I began writing things down, little notes on my phone, just to be sure I wasn't losing my mind. She started criticizing everything I did. The way I folded the laundry, the way I helped the kids with homework, the meals I cooked. My teaching job, which had always been stable and fulfilling, suddenly became a target. "Still just a high school teacher, Ethan? Don't you want more?" It was a constant drip, drip, drip of negativity, eroding my already fragile sense of self-worth. The kids noticed. Leo, at 11, was quiet but observant. He'd watch our interactions with wide, worried eyes. Chloe, younger, would sometimes retreat to her room or become clingy, burying her face in my side when Sarah was in one of her moods. The house, which should have been a sanctuary for them, felt charged, unsafe. I suggested counselling again. We'd tried it years ago, a few times, always hitting a wall. Sarah would charm the therapist initially, presenting a picture of a slightly beleaguered wife dealing with a difficult, emotionally distant husband, me. But as soon as the therapist gently probed her behavior, her lack of intimacy, her critical nature, Sarah would shut down. She'd leave the session furious, accusing the therapist of taking my side, of not understanding her, and refuse to go back. This time was no different. Counselling? What do we need counselling for? She scoffed when I brought it up. Maybe you need counselling, Ethan, to deal with your trust issues and your jealousy. Sarah, we can't keep living like this. The kids can feel it. The kids are fine, she snapped. You're the one making a drama out of everything, just like you always do. That was a lie. I was the one who avoided drama, who smoothed things over, who tried to keep the peace. She was the one creating it. The breaking point wasn't a single dramatic event. It was a slow, agonizing realization that the person I had built my life with was systematically dismantling me, piece by piece, and using the debris to shield herself from her own actions. I looked at my children, their bright eyes clouded with worry, and I knew I couldn't keep them in this environment. The constant tension, the unpredictability of Sarah's moods, the subtle but pervasive negativity, it was a form of poison, slowly seeping into their lives. Staying together for the kids was no longer protecting them, it was harming them. The decision solidified inside me, heavy and terrifying, but also strangely clear. I had to leave. For them. For me. I chose a Tuesday evening. The kids were at their after-school clubs. I waited until Sarah got home from work. She was in the kitchen, putting away groceries, her movements precise and efficient. Sarah, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. I need to talk to you, seriously. She paused, a carton of milk in her hand. She didn't look at me. What is it, Ethan? I'm busy. I don't think we can do this anymore. I think we need to separate. The milk carton hit the counter with a thud. It didn't break, but the sound was loud in the quiet kitchen. She turned to face me, her eyes blazing. Separate? What are you talking about? Us, the marriage. It's not working. It hasn't been for a long time. It's not healthy for either of us, and it's not fair to the kids. Her face twisted into a mask of fury. Not healthy? You're not healthy, Ethan. You're the one with issues. You think leaving is going to solve everything? You think you can just walk away? I'm not walking away from the kids. I'm walking away from this. I gestured vaguely between us, encompassing the years of distance, the recent weeks of abuse. This is our life, Ethan. Our family. And you're going to throw it all away because of some ridiculous paranoia about a work trip. Because you can't handle that I have a life outside of you. She was twisting it again, making it about the conference, about my supposed insecurity, anything but her own actions, her own contribution to the breakdown. It's not just the conference, Sarah. It's everything. The way you treat me, the way you shut me out, the way you make me feel like I'm crazy. Maybe you are crazy, she shrieked, her voice rising. Maybe you are. I can't live like this anymore, Ethan, with your accusations, your neediness, your constant disappointment in me. My disappointment in her, the sheer audacity of it took my breath away. My disappointment? I repeated, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. What about my disappointment, Sarah? Years of feeling like I wasn't enough? Years of trying to connect with someone who flinches away from my touch? Years of walking on eggshells in my own home? That seemed to hit a nerve. Her face flushed, not with anger this time, but something that looked dangerously close to shame. But she quickly masked it. Fine, she spat, turning back to the counter. If that's what you want, go, get out, see how you like it on your own. I'll find a place nearby, I said, my voice quieter now, the adrenaline draining away, leaving behind a vast emptiness. For me and the kids. She spun back around, her eyes wide with disbelief. The kids? You think you're taking the kids? Don't be ridiculous, Ethan. They stay here, with me. This is their home. This is our home, Sarah, and they need stability. They need peace. The argument escalated, raw and ugly. She accused me of trying to steal her children, of being selfish, of ruining their lives. I stood my ground, stating calmly but firmly that I would be seeking primary custody. It was the hardest conversation of my life, tearing apart the last threads of what had once been our family unit. By the time the kids came home, the air was thick with the aftermath, a silent, heavy presence they immediately sensed. Sarah retreated to the bedroom, slamming the door. I was left to make dinner, my hands shaking, trying to act normal for their sake. The next morning, Sarah was gone when we woke up. A note on the kitchen counter, brief and cold. Went to Mom's. We'll be in touch. Just like that. After nearly 2 decades, it ended with a slammed door and a note. The first few weeks were a blur of legal consultations. Finding a small rental house in a different, slightly older suburban neighborhood, about 20 minutes away, packing boxes, and trying to explain to Leo and Chloe what was happening. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I sat them down on the sofa, their faces upturned and trusting, and tried to find the right words. Mommy and Daddy have decided that it's best if we don't live together anymore, I said, my voice thick with emotion. It's not anyone's fault, especially not yours. Sometimes grown-ups just grow in different directions, but we both love you very, very much, and that will never change. Leo was quiet, his eyes darting between mine. Chloe started to cry, soft, heartbroken sobs that tore at my chest. I held them both close, murmuring reassurances, feeling like the biggest failure in the world for not being able to keep their family together. Moving was chaotic and stressful. My friend David Rodriguez, a fellow history teacher and one of the few people I'd confided in minimally over the years, showed up with his pickup truck and helped me move boxes. He didn't ask too many questions, just offered quiet support and cracked a few well-timed jokes about my questionable furniture choices. His presence was a lifeline. The new house was smaller, older, with a tiny yard. It felt strange and empty at first, filled with boxes and the echo of our footsteps. But it was ours. There was no tension humming in the air, no need to brace myself for a sudden outburst or a cutting remark. The kids helped unpack, choosing paint colours for their rooms, a bright blue for Leo, a cheerful yellow for Chloe. We spent an afternoon assembling their beds, laughing when we put a piece on backward. Slowly, tentatively, the house started to feel like a home. The divorce proceedings began, a slow, bureaucratic process of filing papers, exchanging financial information and negotiating terms through lawyers. Sarah, true to form, was difficult. She dragged her feet, argued over possessions, and tried to make everything as complicated as possible. Her lawyer communicated her demands and accusations. I was abandoning her. I was trying to steal her children. I was financially ruining her, despite my modest teacher's salary and her significantly higher corporate one. It was exhausting, but I had my own lawyer, a calm, no-nonsense woman named Miss Peterson, who navigated the legal maze for me. Custody was the main point of contention, at least initially. Sarah insisted on 50-50, but her actions quickly contradicted her words. She rarely called the kids. When she did, the conversations were short, strained. She'd agree to see them on a weekend, then cancel at the last minute with a flimsy excuse via text message. Something came up, or not feeling well. Leo stopped asking about it after the second or third cancellation. He seemed almost relieved. Chloe still asked sometimes, her lower lip trembling, "When are we seeing Mommy?" It broke my heart every time. I'd tell her, "Soon, honey," or "She's busy this weekend, but maybe next." I couldn't bring myself to tell them the truth, that their mother seemed to be actively avoiding them. I started going to individual therapy. It was Miss Peterson who suggested it, seeing the toll the divorce and Sarah's behavior were taking on me. Sitting in that small, quiet room, talking to a kind, patient therapist named Dr. Ramirez, was like finding an oasis in a desert. I poured out everything, the years of walking on eggshells, the constant criticism, the gaslighting, the way I'd come to believe I was the problem. Dr. Ramirez listened, asked gentle questions, and slowly, patiently helped me see the patterns. She introduced me to the concept of covert narcissism. Reading about it was like flipping a switch. Suddenly, Sarah's behavior made terrifying sense. The lack of empathy, the need for control, the projection, the inability to take responsibility, the charming facade masking a manipulative core. It wasn't me. It had never been me. It was her. That realization was both devastating and liberating. Devastating because it meant the marriage was never what I thought it was, that I had spent 2 decades with someone who couldn't truly love or connect. Liberating because it lifted the crushing weight of self-blame that I had carried for so long. I wasn't the problem. I was the victim of abuse. I also started woodworking again. I cleared out a corner of the small garage at the new house, set up my old workbench and tools. The familiar scent of pine and oak was like a balm. The focused work, the process of taking rough wood and shaping it into something useful or beautiful, was incredibly therapeutic. It was tangible. Unlike my relationship with Sarah, where my efforts vanished into thin air or were twisted into something negative, woodworking offered immediate, visible results. A straight cut, a smooth finish, a joint that fit perfectly. These were small triumphs, proof of my ability to create, to fix, to build something solid and real. I started involving the kids. Leo was hesitant at first, but he enjoyed using the drill press and learning to measure accurately. Chloe loved sanding and painting. We started small, building a birdhouse for the backyard. Then we tackled a wonky kitchen chair that came with the rental. Working side by side with them, teaching them skills my own father had taught me, felt profoundly right. It was building something more important than furniture. It was building connection, trust, and shared memories. Sarah's cancellations became more frequent. Weeks would go by without her seeing the kids. She'd offer weak excuses or simply not respond to my texts asking about visitation. I kept documenting everything, dates, times, her responses, or lack thereof. Miss Peterson advised me to keep a detailed log. It would be important for the custody case. Then came the text message that, while not entirely unexpected, still hit me like a physical blow. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was grading papers in the living room. My phone buzzed. A message from Sarah. "Look, this isn't working. They just ask for you anyway. They don't seem to have fun here. It's too much trouble. I'm happy to give up my rights in the divorce. You wanted them. You take them." That was it. No phone call, no conversation, just a cold, blunt text message abandoning her children. My children. The kids she had insisted should stay with her, whose lives I was supposedly ruining by separating. My first reaction was pure, gut-wrenching heartbreak for Leo and Chloe. How could a mother do this? How could someone just discard her own children? I wanted to rage, to scream at her, to demand an explanation. But then, beneath the shock and the pain, a different feeling surfaced. A quiet, almost guilty sense of relief. Relief that the uncertainty was over. Relief that I wouldn't have to negotiate visits, wouldn't have to make excuses for her cancellations, wouldn't have to watch my kids' faces fall when she let them down again. Relief that the last tie to the toxicity, the last point of potential conflict and manipulation through the children, was being severed. It was a selfish feeling, I knew. My children were being abandoned by their mother, and part of me felt free. That guilt sat heavy in my stomach alongside the pain. I called Miss Peterson immediately. I read her the text message, my voice shaking. She was calm and professional. "Mr. Miller," she said gently, "while this is incredibly difficult for you and the children legally, this strengthens your case for sole custody significantly. And yes, it is possible for a parent to voluntarily relinquish their rights, especially when they haven't been actively involved and express a clear desire to do so. It's uncommon, but not impossible." She explained the process. We would draft an agreement stating that Sarah was voluntarily giving up her parental responsibilities, including financial support. We would present it to the judge. It would still take time, months probably, but the path forward was clear. I didn't tell the kids about the text message. How could I? How do you tell an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old that their mother doesn't want to see them anymore? Instead, the next time Chloe asked about seeing Mommy, I just said, "Mommy's going to be very busy for a while, honey, but you have me, and we have each other." Leo didn't ask. Later that week, while we were building a simple bird feeder in the garage, he said quietly, "I don't really like going to Mom's anyway." "Oh, why not, buddy?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. He shrugged, sanding a piece of wood. "She just sleeps a lot, or she's on her phone, and sometimes she yells." He paused. "I like it better here. It's quieter." My heart ached hearing that. I had known things weren't great, but hearing him say he preferred the quiet of our smaller, broken family to the tension of the supposedly whole one we'd had, it confirmed that leaving was the right choice, no matter how painful the path had been. A few weeks after Sarah's text, an unexpected message arrived on my personal email. It was from Jessica, the friend, the one who had initially sent the screenshots from the conference. I hadn't heard from her directly since then, though I knew she was still in contact with some people from Sarah's work circle. Hesitantly, I opened the email. "Ethan, I heard about Sarah, about her not seeing Leo and Chloe anymore. I know you probably hate me or think I'm crazy, but I wanted to reach out. I saw the way she was treating you even before the conference. And I've seen how she treats other people. I wanted to tell you the conference thing. Alex wasn't the first. And it wasn't just about hooking up. She does this. She finds someone, uses them, then discards them. Men, friends, anyone. She did it to me years ago when we were closer. Twisted things, lied, turned people against me. I sent you those screenshots partly because I was angry, yes, but also because I hoped it would make you see, make you finally leave. I know that sounds messed up, but I saw you walking on the same path I did, just slower. I'm so sorry for how I did it. I just wanted you to know you're not alone in seeing who she really is. And I'm so sorry about the kids." Reading Jessica's email was surreal. It wasn't a full explanation for Sarah's behavior, but it was confirmation. Confirmation that I wasn't crazy, wasn't the problem, wasn't imagining things. It was a pattern. Sarah didn't just treat me this way. It was how she operated. She used people, manipulated them, and discarded them when they were no longer useful, or when they threatened to expose her. The conference incident, the kissing, the messages, it wasn't just a one-off mistake driven by guilt. It was part of a larger, disturbing pattern of behavior. Jessica, in her own flawed way, had been trying to give me a warning. Another victim trying to help the next one escape the spiderweb. I didn't reply to Jessica immediately. Her message was a lot to process. But it settled something inside me. It reinforced that the divorce, the separation, the pain of the abandonment, it wasn't a failure on my part. It was an escape. An escape from a person incapable of genuine connection, empathy, or responsibility. The legal process moved slowly, as Miss Peterson had predicted. There were papers to sign, forms to file. Sarah remained detached, communicating only through her lawyer, focused on the division of assets, seemingly unconcerned with anything else. She even came back to the old house one afternoon to collect some more of her things while I was at work. When I got home, I noticed something was wrong in the garage. My favourite set of chisels, the ones my dad had given me, were scattered on the floor, some with nicks in the blades that looked deliberately made. A small carved wooden bird, one of the first things I'd ever made with my dad, was missing. It was petty, vindictive, a final little twist of the knife. She knew how much those things meant to me. I took photos, added them to my log, the quiet anger a cold counterpoint to the relief that she was almost entirely out of our lives. Life with the kids settled into a new rhythm. School, homework, dinner together every night. Chores. They complained, but did them. And then, our time. Reading together, watching movies, playing board games and woodworking. We finished the bird feeder and hung it in a tree in the yard, watching the cardinals and finches discover it. We built a small, wobbly bookshelf for Chloe's room. Leo and I started working on building a small, functional workbench for him in the garage, a project that required patience and precision. These shared activities weren't just hobbies. They were anchors, grounding us in the present, building something positive and lasting together. There were still hard moments. Some nights, after the kids were asleep, the quiet house felt overwhelmingly empty. The loneliness would creep in, a cold ache in my chest. I hadn't been truly intimate with someone, physically or emotionally, in years, and the thought of facing that reality alone was daunting. I missed the idea of a partner, a confidant, someone to share the small moments of the day with. But then I would remember the tension, the criticism, the feeling of being constantly judged and found wanting, and the loneliness, while painful, felt infinitely preferable to that. One evening, Chloe was watching an animated movie about dinosaurs. It was a sweet, sad story about loss and finding family. Suddenly she burst into tears, quiet at first, then full, heartbreaking sobs. "I miss Mommy," she cried, burying her face in my shirt. My own eyes welled up instantly. I held her tight, stroking her hair, murmuring reassurances. I didn't try to minimize her feelings, didn't say anything negative about Sarah. I just held her, letting her cry, letting her feel the sadness. "I know, sweetie," I whispered. "It's okay to miss her. It's okay to be sad." I stayed there with her until her sobs subsided, until she was just sniffling into my shirt. We talked a little about her favourite memories with Sarah, simple things like going to the park or baking cookies, before Sarah stopped doing things like that. It was painful, acknowledging the loss, but necessary. I made sure she knew, absolutely knew, that her mother's absence was not her fault. Not hers, not Leo's, not mine. It was a grown-up problem, a grown-up sadness. After she finally fell asleep, tucked back into her bed, I sat in the living room in the dark. The quiet felt different now. Not just lonely, but heavy with the weight of her sadness. Doubt, that old familiar enemy, started to creep in. Had I done the right thing? Was leaving worth the pain it caused them? Should I have just stayed, suffered through it, kept the family together, at least until they were older? Maybe I was selfish. Maybe I was the one who failed them. For a few terrifying minutes, the thought of reaching out to Sarah, of begging her to come back, to try again, flickered in my mind. To be a family again, even a broken one. But then I saw Leo's face, relieved in the quiet house. I remembered Chloe's tears, not just tonight, but the anxious look in her eyes when Sarah was around. I remembered Jessica's email, the pattern of discard. I remembered Dr. Ramirez telling me about the insidious nature of the abuse. No. Going back would be a betrayal of myself, and more importantly, a betrayal of my children's need for a safe, stable, emotionally healthy environment. An environment Sarah was incapable of providing. The pain they were feeling now was acute, but living in the constant, low-grade toxicity of the marriage would have been a slow, soul-destroying poison. This was better. Harder in some ways, but better. I didn't send the text. I sat there in the dark, letting the sadness wash over me, acknowledging the loss, but holding on to the truth I had learned. We were safer now. We were healing. The divorce was finalized just before Christmas. It felt anticlimactic. A few signed papers, an email from Miss Peterson confirming the judge had approved the agreement, including Sarah's voluntary relinquishment. It was done. Sarah Miller was officially my ex-wife, and she was officially no longer legally responsible for our children. The lack of fanfare felt strange for something that had consumed my life for the better part of a year and defined it for 2 decades. There was no dramatic courtroom scene, no tearful goodbyes, just the quiet, legal confirmation of a reality that had already taken hold. Sarah was gone, out of our lives. She didn't ask about the kids, didn't send a Christmas card. Nothing. Her side of the family also remained distant, except for the occasional polite message from Jessica, who I had finally replied to, thanking her for her honesty and wishing her well. Life continued. The kids adjusted. Leo seemed more relaxed, more talkative. He joined the school chess club and started spending hours in the garage with me, working on his workbench, planning impossible future projects. Chloe still had moments where she missed her mom, but they became less frequent. She blossomed in the stable environment, her laughter ringing through the house. She loved helping me cook dinner now, standing on a stool to stir sauces or chop vegetables with a child-safe knife. My therapy sessions continued, helping me process the years of abuse and rebuild my self-esteem. Dr. Ramirez helped me understand that my value wasn't tied to Sarah's approval or disapproval, that her criticisms were a reflection of her own issues, not my worth. It was a slow process, peeling back the layers of self-doubt that had accumulated over years, but it was working. I started to feel lighter, more confident. The constant anxiety I hadn't even realized I was living with began to dissipate. The eggshells were gone. Woodworking became more than just therapy. It became a source of quiet pride and even a potential side hustle. I started taking on small projects for friends and colleagues, fixing a wobbly table, building a custom shelf. The tangible results were incredibly satisfying. I even started thinking about setting up an online page to sell some smaller items, something I never would have dared to do when Sarah was around. The thought of putting myself out there, of potentially receiving attention or feedback, would have triggered her insecurity and criticism. Now it felt like a possibility, a small step towards building something new for myself. I was still a high school history teacher. I still loved the dusty quiet of the library. But I wasn't just Ethan Miller, the quiet, slightly overwhelmed husband walking on eggshells. I was Ethan Miller, father, woodworker, survivor. There were still lonely nights, especially after the kids were asleep. The house would fall silent, and the absence of another adult presence was palpable. Dating felt like an alien concept after 2 decades. Who would want a middle-aged guy with 2 kids and a complicated past? The thought was daunting. But I knew, deep down, that I wouldn't settle. Not again. I wouldn't invite toxicity back into my life or my children's lives just to avoid being alone. Peace was too hard won. One Saturday morning, instead of the usual frantic rush to get the kids ready for a weekend visit that might be cancelled, we had nowhere to be. The house was quiet, filled with the soft sounds of cartoons from the living room and the smell of pancakes I was making. Leo wandered into the kitchen, still in his pajamas. "What are we doing today, Dad?" he asked, his voice sleepy. I smiled. "Whatever we want, buddy. No rushing. Maybe we can work on your workbench later, or go to the park, or just stay in our pajamas all day." His face lit up. "Stay in pajamas." Chloe padded in, rubbing her eyes, and echoed the sentiment. We spent the morning lounging, eating pancakes, watching cartoons. It was simple, peaceful, joyful. There was no underlying tension, no criticism, no fear of saying or doing the wrong thing. Just easy, comfortable presence. That afternoon, we went out to the garage. The smell of sawdust filled the air. We worked on Leo's workbench together, measuring, cutting, screwing pieces into place. It was slow work, but satisfying. Leo was learning patience, problem-solving, the satisfaction of building something with his own hands. He was focused, his brow furrowed in concentration. He was safe. He was happy. Watching him, watching Chloe nearby drawing with chalk on the garage floor, a profound sense of gratitude washed over me. It hadn't been the life I planned. It was messy, painful, marked by betrayal and loss. My children carried scars they shouldn't have to bear. But we were here. We were together. We were building something new, something real, something strong. The old house, the old life, felt like a distant bad dream. The man who walked on eggshells, who blamed himself, who felt like he was never enough. He was a ghost of the past. The quiet, the peace, the simple joy of being with my children, building things with my hands. This was my reality now. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of sadness, of loneliness, of worry about the future. But there was also resilience. There was hope. There was the quiet strength of a father who had lost a marriage but saved his family, piece by painstaking piece, and found his own worth in the process. The sun streamed into the garage, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, the golden colour of the wood, the focused expressions on my children's faces. It felt like light finally flooding into a place that had been dark for too long. We were okay. More than okay. We were free. And we were building. The seasons changed in suburban Ohio, the humid green of summer giving way to the crisp, fiery colours of autumn, then the stark, quiet beauty of winter, and finally the hopeful burst of spring. Each season felt like a marker of our progress, another period weathered and overcome together. Leo's workbench was finished by the time the leaves turned. It wasn't perfect. Some joints were a little uneven, a few nail heads weren't perfectly flush, but it was sturdy, functional, and built by his own hands, mostly. He spent hours out there with me, puttering, sorting screws, watching me work on my own projects. He even started sketching out designs for things he wanted to build. His quiet observation had turned into active participation. Chloe, too, found her place in the garage. She declared herself the official sander and painter. She'd meticulously smooth down edges and carefully apply coats of paint to smaller projects. Her cheerful chatter filled the space, a stark contrast to the tense silence that used to hang in the air at the old house. My woodworking side projects grew. Friends recommended me to friends. I started a small Instagram page, cautiously at first, posting pictures of finished pieces, a custom coffee table, a set of floating shelves, a child's rocking horse. The positive feedback was unexpected, a small validation that had nothing to do with Sarah. It felt good to create something that others appreciated, something solid and real. I even sold a few pieces, setting aside the money for the kids' college funds. The loneliness didn't disappear entirely, but it became less acute. I filled my evenings after the kids were asleep with reading, planning lessons, working in the garage, or sometimes just watching a movie without the fear of being criticized for my choice. I reconnected with a few old college friends online. Casual conversations, shared memories, a reminder that there was a world outside the one I had been trapped in. Dating remained on the distant horizon. The thought still felt overwhelming. But I was starting to believe that maybe someday I would be ready. Ready to meet someone who saw me, the real me, and appreciated me. Someone who didn't require me to walk on eggshells. Sarah was a ghost. Her lawyer sent occasional emails regarding minor logistical things related to the finalized divorce, but there was never any contact from her directly. No calls, no texts, no emails, no cards for birthdays or holidays. It was as if she had simply vanished from their lives. It was jarring, heartbreaking for the children, but also final. There was no lingering hope, no false promises to cling to, just the quiet, undeniable reality of her choice. Leo and Chloe were still in therapy. Dr. Ramirez was helping them process the abandonment, helping them understand that it wasn't a reflection of their worth or lovability. They were learning tools to cope with the sadness and confusion. I saw the difference it made. They were more open about their feelings, more resilient. They knew they had a safe space with me, that their feelings were valid, and that they were unconditionally loved. One afternoon, Leo came home from school, looking troubled. He was quiet during dinner, pushing his food around his plate. After Chloe was in bed, he came and sat with me in the living room. "Dad?" he started, his voice small. "Yeah, buddy," I put down my book. Does she ever think about us?" The question hung in the air, heavy with years of unspoken longing and confusion. How do you answer that? I couldn't lie and say yes, not convincingly, not after everything. But I couldn't tell him I didn't know. Or worse, that I suspected she didn't. I don't know, Leo, I said honestly, choosing my words carefully. I wish I did. What I do know is that sometimes grown-ups, they have their own problems. Problems that are so big they can't see clearly. Or they can't be who they're supposed to be. It's not because of anything you did or didn't do. You are an amazing kid, Leo. You are smart and kind, and I am so incredibly proud to be your dad. I reached out and pulled him into a hug. He hugged me back tightly, burying his face in my shoulder. He didn't cry, but I felt the tension in his small body. She just stopped, he murmured into my shirt, like we weren't important anymore. You are important, Leo, I said fiercely, pulling back to look him in the eye. You are the most important thing in my life. You and Chloe, more important than anything. And that will never, ever stop. Ever. He nodded, his expression still sad, but some of the tension seemed to ease. We sat like that for a while longer, just holding each other. It was a quiet acknowledgement of the wound she had inflicted, a shared sadness, but also a reinforcement of the bond that remained, the bond that was stronger because we had faced this together. My own anger towards Sarah had cooled from a burning rage to a cold, hard indifference. I didn't hate her, not actively. I felt a profound sadness for the person she was, or wasn't, capable of being. A sadness for the children she had chosen to abandon. But the love, the longing, the confusion, that was gone. Replaced by a quiet determination to build a life for my children free from her influence, free from the toxicity. The small house felt full of life now. The walls were covered in the kids' drawings. The smell of sawdust from the garage mingled with the aroma of dinner cooking in the kitchen. There were projects underway, books piled on the nightstands, laughter echoing down the hallway. It wasn't the life I had envisioned at 18 or even at 30. It was harder, messier, marked by deeper scars. But it was real. It was ours. And it was good. One evening, working late in the garage on a custom order, I paused, looking around the space. My tools were neatly organized on the pegboard. A half-finished table sat on the workbench, the wood grain beautiful under the lamplight. The air smelled of wood and varnish. It was my space, my sanctuary. A place where I could create, where I could focus, where the world made sense in the careful joining of wood. I thought back to the man I was a year or two ago, confused, hurt, walking on eggshells, believing I was the problem. That man felt like a stranger. I was still quiet, still loved history, still probably a little too comfortable in my worn clothes. But something fundamental had shifted. The abuse had tried to break me, but escaping it, surviving it, had rebuilt me, stronger and clearer. I picked up my plane, the smooth wood handle familiar in my hand. There was still work to do, always work to do, on the table, on myself, on helping my children heal. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I had faced the worst, walked through the fire and come out on the other side, not unscathed but whole. And I had my children, my little best mates, building their lives alongside mine. That was more than enough. The final court document, the official decree of divorce and the order granting me sole custody with Sarah's rights terminated, sat in a folder on my desk. It was just paper. The real freedom, the real ending, had happened months ago, in a cold text message and a quiet realization. The real beginning had happened in a smaller house, with paint-stained walls, the smell of sawdust and the sound of children's laughter. Months turned into a year. The rhythm of our lives in the small Ohio house became second nature. School, homework, dinner, chores, and our shared time. The kids thrived. Leo was doing well in school, his confidence growing. He was getting serious about woodworking, working on more complex joints and finishes. We talked about history, about his classes, about everything and nothing. He was becoming a thoughtful, kind young man. Chloe, now 9, was a whirlwind of energy and creativity. She still loved helping in the garage, but she also discovered a passion for drawing and writing stories. Her therapy was helping her process the lingering sadness and confusion about her mother. She was learning to express her feelings, to understand that her mother's choices weren't about her. My woodworking side business grew steadily. I set up a small online shop and started getting regular orders. It wasn't enough to quit teaching, nor did I want to, but it provided a comfortable extra income and, more importantly, a source of quiet satisfaction. Creating things with my hands, turning raw wood into something beautiful and functional, felt profoundly meaningful. There were still moments that caught me off guard. A song on the radio, a smell, a place we used to go, small triggers that would bring back a wave of sadness or anger or that old familiar confusion. But the waves were smaller now, and they passed more quickly. I had built sturdy anchors in my life, my children, my work, my woodworking, my therapy, my small circle of friends. I even tentatively started dating. It was awkward at first. Explaining my situation felt heavy. Most people recoiled slightly at the mention of an ex-wife who had abandoned her children. It was a lot for someone new to take on. But I met a woman, Emily, through a mutual friend. She was kind, empathetic, and didn't seem fazed by my story. She had her own life, her own complexities. We took things slow. Coffee dates, walks in the park, quiet dinners after the kids were in bed. It was easy. Different from anything I had known with Sarah. There was no tension, no game playing, no need to analyze every word or action, just simple, honest connection. It was a revelation. Sarah remained absent, completely. It was as if she had ceased to exist. No calls, no texts, no attempts to contact the kids through school or friends. It was a complete and utter erasure. It still felt unreal sometimes that a mother could simply walk away. But it was our reality. One day, cleaning out a closet, I found an old photo album. Pictures from early in my marriage with Sarah. Before the distance, before the tension. Pictures of us laughing, pictures from when the kids were babies. Seeing them brought a pang of something. Nostalgia? Sadness? It was hard to say. I looked at a picture of Sarah young and smiling, holding baby Leo. She looked happy. Was it real? Or was it just a performance even then? I didn't know. Maybe I never would. I closed the album, put it back on the shelf. The past was the past. It was history, and I was a history teacher. I knew better than to live there. Leo was getting ready for middle school. Chloe was mastering fractions. My life was full of school papers to grade, wood to mill, baseball practices to drive to, bedtime stories to read, scraped knees to kiss, and endless questions to answer. It was messy and tiring and wonderful. I thought about the man who had written those posts on that online forum years ago. Confused, hurting, seeking answers from strangers on the internet. He felt like a different person. I wanted to reach back in time, tell him it was going to be okay, that the pain was temporary, that the relief was real, that he wasn't a failure, that he was strong, stronger than he knew. I looked out the window of my small house. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the quiet street. Leo was in the garage, the faint sound of sanding drifting in. Chloe was curled up on the sofa, reading. Emily was coming over later for dinner. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good. It was honest. It was mine. The scars remained, faint lines etched onto the landscape of my heart. The memory of the abuse, the betrayal, the abandonment, it was part of my story now. But it wasn't the whole story. The story was also about resilience, about healing, about the unwavering love between a father and his children, about building something new from the wreckage, about finding peace in the quiet moments. I stood up, stretched. Time to check on Leo, see if he needed help with that tricky joint. Time to see what Chloe was reading. Time to set the table for dinner. My life wasn't defined by what I had lost, but by what I had built, and what I was still building. The sound of the sander stopped. Footsteps approached the back door. Leo came in, covered in sawdust, a proud grin on his face. "Dad, look! I got it perfect!" He held up a piece of wood, a clean, smooth edge catching the light. I smiled, a genuine, easy smile that reached my eyes. "That's great, buddy," I said, putting my arm around his shoulders. "You did a fantastic job." He leaned into my side for a moment, comfortable and secure. This was the victory. This was the peace. This was home. Years passed. The small house remained our home, filled with the ever-changing evidence of growing children. School projects, sports equipment, video game controllers, art supplies, and always the faint, comforting smell of sawdust from the garage. Leo entered high school, navigating the complexities of teenagers with a quiet confidence that made me incredibly proud. He continued woodworking, his skills surpassing mine. He even started selling some of his larger pieces online, building a small reputation for his craftsmanship. He was thoughtful, kind, and had a strong sense of who he was. Chloe entered middle school, blossoming into a vibrant, expressive young woman. She still loved art and writing, but she also discovered a passion for drama, throwing herself into school plays with infectious enthusiasm. She was empathetic and fiercely protective of her brother and me. They were both still in therapy, working through the